It starts with a question you've asked yourself 1,000 times, but never out loud. You're sitting across from someone, but somewhere beneath your ribs, there's this feeling, this quiet, aching feeling that no matter how close you get, you're still somehow separate. Like there's glass between you and everyone else. You wonder if they feel it too. If they notice the way you hesitate before speaking, the way you edit yourself mid-sentence, the way you laugh a little too late. As if you're watching the moment from outside your own body. And the worst part? You can't explain it, because nothing is technically wrong. The conversation is fine. The person is kind. But connection, real connection, feels like trying to hold water in your hands. Maybe you've convinced yourself it's just you, that everyone else has figured out some secret language of intimacy that you were never taught, that you missed the lesson on how to let people in without fear, without armor, without the constant, exhausting performance of being okay. But here's the truth. You're not alone in this, and it's not your fault, because the inability to connect isn't about being broken. It's about being human in a world that taught you connection was dangerous. A. The invisible barrier. A. Let me tell you what's really happening beneath the surface. When connection feels impossible, it's not because you don't want it. It's because somewhere deep in your nervous system, your brain has learned that closeness equals risk. That vulnerability equals pain. And you know what? That's not paranoia. That's memory. Because at some point, maybe when you were young, maybe more recently, you reached out and the world didn't catch you. You showed someone the parts of you that felt too raw, too real, too much. And they either looked away, or worse, they used it against you. So your mind did what any intelligent system would do. It adapted. It built walls. Not to keep people out entirely, but to keep you safe inside. Psychologists call this an avoidant attachment pattern. But that term doesn't capture the loneliness of it. The way you can be surrounded by people and still feel like you're watching life through a window. The way you crave intimacy but flinch the moment it gets too close. It's not coldness. It's self-preservation dressed as distance. And the tragedy is that the very thing protecting you is also isolating you. Because when you armor yourself against hurt, you also armor yourself against love. Against the possibility that someone might actually stay. You start to notice patterns. You meet someone new. And for a moment, you think, maybe this time, it'll be different. But then the fear creeps in. What if they see the parts of you that aren't polished? What if you say the wrong thing? What if you're too much or not enough? What if they leave like everyone else did? So you pull back. Just slightly. You text a little less. You share a little less. You keep the conversation light, safe, surface level, and eventually, the distance you created to protect yourself becomes the distance that proves your fears right. They drift away. Not because you weren't worth knowing, but because you never let them close enough to know you. And the cycle repeats. Here's what makes this so devastating. Connection isn't just about being around people. It's about being seen. Truly seen. Not the version of you that smiles and says, "I'm fine." Not the version that performs competence and calm, but the version that's scared. That's messy. That doesn't have all the answers. And when you've spent years hiding that version, even from yourself, letting someone see it feels like standing naked in a spotlight. Every flaw magnified, every imperfection exposed. Your mind starts to whisper things. They'll judge you. They'll think you're too sensitive, too damaged, too complicated. And so you edit, you curate, you present a version of yourself that feels manageable, acceptable, safe. But here's the paradox. The more you edit, the less connected you feel. Because the person they're getting to know isn't really you. It's a performance. And deep down, you know it. That's why even when someone says, "I love you," and you're terrified of what happens when the mask slips. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon. They call it the false self, the identity we construct to meet the world's expectations, to earn love, to avoid rejection, But the cost of maintaining that false self is profound, because it means you can never fully relax. You're always one mistake away from being discovered. And that hypervigilance, that constant monitoring of how you're being perceived, is exhausting. It turns every interaction into a performance, every silence into a threat, every pause into proof that you've said something wrong. So you start to withdraw. Not because you don't want connection, but because the effort of pretending feels heavier than the loneliness of being alone. But here's what's quietly destroying you. The loneliness isn't just about being physically alone. It's about being emotionally alone, even when you're surrounded by people. You can be at a party, smiling, laughing, and still feel like you're drowning, because no one there knows what's happening inside you. The shame, the belief that if they really knew you, they wouldn't choose you. And the worst part? You can't ask for help, because asking for help feels like admitting defeat, like confirming that you're as broken as you fear. So you stay silent. You carry it alone, and the gap between your inner world and the world you present to others grows wider and wider until you start to feel like two separate people, the one everyone sees and the one no one knows. That's the isolation. Not the absence of people, but the absence of being truly known. Neuroscience tells us that humans are wired for connection. Our brains literally need social bonds to regulate emotion. When we're isolated, our stress hormones increase, our immune systems weaken, our mental health deteriorates. But here's the cruel irony. The people who need connection the most are often the ones who find it hardest to access, because their past taught them that closeness equals danger, that trust equals betrayal, that love is temporary. So they live in this constant state of longing and fear, wanting desperately to be close to someone, but terrified of what closeness might cost. And that fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because when you expect rejection, you unconsciously create it. You test people. You push them away to see if they'll stay. You sabotage moments of intimacy because waiting for abandonment feels safer than being surprised by it. Psychologists call this a rejection sensitivity. But that term doesn't capture the pain of it. The way your heart races when someone takes too long to text back. The way your mind spirals into catastrophe when someone cancels plans. The way you interpret every small distance as proof that you were right all along. That you're unlovable, but you're not. You're just scared. And the language no one taught you. And there's something else happening here. Something quieter, but just as powerful. You never learned how to connect. Not because you're incapable, but because no one taught you. Because the people who were supposed to model healthy intimacy, your parents, your caregivers, your early relationships, either weren't capable of it themselves or were too consumed by their own pain to show you. So you grew up watching love from the outside. You saw versions of it. Transactional love, conditional love, love that required you to be good, to be quiet, to not need too much. And you learned. You learned that love is something you earn, not something you receive freely. You learned that your needs are burdens, that your emotions are inconvenient, that to be loved, you must first be useful. And now, as an adult, you carry those lessons into every relationship. You give and give and give, hoping that if you prove your worth, someone will finally choose to stay. But deep down, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because in your experience, love has always been conditional. That's why connection feels impossible. Not because you lack the capacity for it, but because you never had a safe model of what it looks like. You never saw two people navigate conflict with kindness. You never witnessed someone apologize without defensiveness. You never experienced a relationship where both people could be messy and still be loved. So now, when conflict arises, your instinct is to shut down, to withdraw. You don't know how to fight and still feel safe. You don't know how to be angry without fear of abandonment. You don't know how to express a need without shame. Because in your formative years, emotions were punished. Anger was met with rage. Sadness was dismissed. Fear was ridiculed. So you learned to bury them, to smile through pain, to say, "I'm fine" when you're falling apart. And now, as an adult, you don't even know what you feel half the time. because you've spent so long suppressing your emotions that they've become strangers to you. Here's what happens when you grow up without emotional language. You lose the ability to name what's happening inside you. Someone asks, "How are you feeling?" And you freeze, because the honest answer is too complex, too overwhelming, too much to put into words. So you say, "I'm okay," and hope they don't press further. But inside, there's a storm, anxiety about the future, grief for the past, shame for existing, loneliness that feels like a physical ache, and beneath it all, a quiet, desperate longing to be understood without having to explain. Psychologists call this alexithymia, the inability to identify and describe emotions. It's not a disorder, it's a learned response, a survival mechanism that helped you navigate an environment where feelings weren't safe. But now, it's keeping you isolated, so you stay surface level. You talk about work, the weather, surface observations, and wonder why every relationship feels shallow. But the truth is, it's not that you don't feel deeply. It's that you don't know how to translate that depth into words, into vulnerability, into connection. And every time you try, you stumble. You overshare and then immediately regret it. Or you say nothing and feel invisible. There's no middle ground, no balance, just extremes that leave you feeling more alone than before. Here's the other part. Even when you do find the words, even when you gather the courage to be vulnerable, there's a voice in your head that says, and so you backtrack. You minimize, you laugh it off. You say, never mind, it's not a big deal, even though it is, because somewhere along the way, you learn that your pain is an inconvenience, that your struggles are a burden, that people have their own problems and don't need to hear about yours. So you carry everything alone. You process your pain in silence. You cry in private. You heal in the dark. And the world sees you as strong, as independent, as someone who has it all together. But inside, you're screaming. You're begging for someone to notice, to ask the question one more time and mean it, to see through the "I'm fine" and hold space for the truth. But no one does, because you've trained them not to, because you've perfected the art of being okay. And now, even when you're not, people believe the performance. That's the price of self-sufficiency. You become so good at surviving alone that no one thinks to check if you're okay, and asking directly feels like weakness, like failure, like proof that you're as needy as you fear. So you stay silent, and the gap between you and everyone else grows wider. The research on this is clear. People who struggle with emotional expression report significantly higher levels of loneliness and depression, not because they lack relationships, but because their relationships lack depth. They have friends, acquaintances, people they see regularly, but no one who truly knows them. No one who's seen the parts they're ashamed of and stayed anyway. And that absence, that lack of true intimacy, is one of the most painful forms of isolation there is. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen. Invisible, like your existence doesn't echo anywhere. And over time, that invisibility starts to feel like truth. You begin to believe that maybe you don't deserve to be seen, that maybe your inner world isn't as interesting or important as you thought, that maybe everyone else has it figured out and you're the only one still struggling. But that's not true. That's just what isolation does. It distorts your perception. It makes you feel like an outlier when really you're part of a quiet majority. People who crave connection but don't know how to access it. People who feel too much but say too little. People who are drowning in plain sight. You are not alone in this, even when it feels like you are. End. The weight of being misunderstood. There's another layer to this, one that's rarely talked about. Connection feels impossible, not just because of what you didn't learn, but because of what you did learn. Maybe you were too sensitive as a child. You cried too easily. You felt things too deeply. And instead of being held, you were told to toughen up, to stop being so emotional, to get over it. So you learned that your sensitivity was a flaw, something to hide. Or maybe you were too different, too quiet, too loud, too much of something the world didn't know how to hold. And instead of being celebrated, you were corrected, shaped, molded into something more acceptable. And in the process, you lost yourself. You buried the parts that made you unique, the parts that felt authentic, and you replaced them with a version that fit. That didn't cause problems. That didn't make people uncomfortable. But here's what happens when you do that. You start to feel like a stranger in your own skin, because the person you're presenting to the world isn't you. And every day you maintain it, the distance between who you are and who you're pretending to be grows wider, until one day, you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You look in the mirror and see someone you don't know. Someone who's competent and functional and fine, but hollow, like there's nothing behind the eyes. And that hollowness, that sense of being disconnected from yourself, is what makes connection with others impossible. Psychologists call this self-alienation, the feeling of being estranged from your own identity. It happens when you've spent so long performing, so long adapting, so long meeting everyone else's expectations that you've lost sight of what you actually want, what you actually feel, what you actually need. And the longer it goes on, the more terrifying it becomes to peel back the layers. Because what if there's nothing underneath? What if the performance is all there is? That fear keeps you stuck, keeps you surface level. Because deep down, you're terrified that if someone sees the real you, the messy, uncertain, still figuring it out you, they'll realize you're not worth knowing, that you're not as interesting or valuable as the version you've been presenting. But here's the truth. The version you've been hiding is the one worth knowing, the one with scars and questions and fears, the one who doesn't have it all figured out, the one who's still learning how to be human. That's the version people connect with. Not the polished, perfect, put-together version, but the real one, the vulnerable one, the one who admits they're scared and shows up anyway. But letting people see that version requires something terrifying. It requires you to believe that you're worthy of love, even when you're imperfect, even when you're struggling, even when you don't have anything to offer except your honest, flawed, beautiful humanity. And if you've spent your whole life believing that love is conditional, that belief feels impossible. Here's what makes this so painful. You watch other people connect effortlessly. You see them laugh, share stories, form bonds that seem natural and easy. And you wonder what's wrong with you, why it feels so hard, why every interaction feels like walking through quicksand. But what you don't see is that they're struggling too. Just in different ways, with different fears, different histories. Because here's the secret. Everyone is scared of connection. Everyone is managing some version of, what if I'm too much? What if I'm not enough? What if they leave? The difference is, some people learn to share that fear, to say it out loud, and others learn to hide it, to manage it alone, to convince themselves they don't need anyone. But both groups are scared. Both groups are vulnerable. Both groups are navigating the impossible task of being human in a world that doesn't always feel safe. You're not defective. You're just carrying wounds that haven't healed yet. And those wounds make connection feel dangerous. Because when you've been hurt before, your brain is wired to protect you from being hurt again. That's not weakness. That's survival. But survival, while necessary, isn't the same as living. And at some point, you have to decide. Do you want to stay safe behind your walls? Or do you want to risk being hurt again for the chance at something real? There's no right answer. Both choices have costs. Both require courage. But what I can tell you is this. The walls you built to protect yourself are also the walls keeping you isolated. And as long as they stay up, connection will feel impossible. Not because you're incapable of it. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is incredibly adaptable. Neural pathways that were formed in childhood, the ones that taught you connection is dangerous, can be rewired. Slowly, through new experiences, through relationships that prove the old stories wrong. But it requires something uncomfortable. It requires you to stay in moments of vulnerability, even when every instinct is screaming at you to run. To let someone see you cry without immediately apologizing for it. To express a need without minimizing it. To ask for help without shame. It requires you to practice the very thing that feels impossible: connection. And at first, it will feel terrifying. Your body will resist. Your mind will flood with warnings. Every old fear will surface. But if you can stay, if you can breathe through it, if you can allow yourself to be seen even for a moment, something shifts. You start to learn that vulnerability doesn't always lead to pain, that sometimes it leads to understanding, to empathy, to the kind of connection you've been craving all along. But it's slow. It's messy. It's not a straight line. There will be setbacks. Moments where you retreat back into your shell. Moments where the fear wins. And that's okay. That's part of the process. Healing isn't about never being scared. It's about being scared and showing up anyway. S, 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 E, S, 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 E, S, S, A, S, the quiet hope. S, 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 E, S, 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 E, S, S, A, S. So where does that leave you? Right here. In this moment, aware of the patterns, aware of the fear, aware that connection feels impossible. But awareness is the first step, because you can't change something you don't understand. And now you understand. You understand that your difficulty with connection isn't a character flaw. It's a learned response, a protective mechanism that once kept you safe, but is now keeping you isolated. You understand that the walls you built were necessary at the time, but they don't have to be permanent. You understand that vulnerability feels dangerous because it was dangerous. But not every person is the person who hurt you, and not every moment of openness will lead to pain. And most importantly, you understand that you're not alone in this, that millions of people are navigating the same invisible barrier, the same fear, the same longing. And that understanding, that recognition that you're part of something larger, is itself a form of connection. Because even now, reading these words, you're not alone. Someone else is reading them too, feeling the same thing, recognizing themselves in the same patterns. And maybe that's where it starts. Not with a dramatic breakthrough, not with a sudden fix, but with the quiet acknowledgement that your struggle is real, that your fear makes sense, that your isolation isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of a mind trying to protect a heart that's been hurt too many times. Here's what I want you to know. Connection is still possible. Not easy, not immediate, not guaranteed, but possible. It starts with small risks, tiny moments of honesty, letting someone see a fraction more of who you are than you usually allow. It starts with finding people who are also willing to be real, who don't need you to be perfect, who can sit with your uncertainty and not try to fix it. It starts with self-compassion, with being gentle with yourself on the days when the fear wins. When you retreat, when you can't find the words, because healing isn't linear. It's messy, full of setbacks, full of moments where you feel like you're right back where you started. But you're not, because even in the setbacks, you're learning. You're noticing patterns, you're building awareness, and that awareness, over time, creates space for something new. It creates space for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to carry everything alone anymore. That maybe there are people out there who will meet your vulnerability with their own, who will see your fear and not run, who will hold your pain without trying to solve it. Those people exist. They're rare, but they exist. And when you find them, when you finally risk being seen and they stay, something extraordinary happens. Not all at once, but slowly, like light seeping through a door you thought was permanently closed. And in that light, you start to see yourself differently. Not as broken, not as too much, but as someone who survived something hard and is still here. Still trying, still capable of love, even though love has hurt before. Psychologists talk about something called earned, secure attachment. It's the idea that even if you didn't learn healthy connection as a child, you can still learn it as an adult, through conscious effort, through new relationships, through healing. It's not easy. It requires you to confront the very fears you've been avoiding, to sit with discomfort, to practice vulnerability even when it feels unnatural. But it's possible. And every time you take that risk, every time you choose connection over safety, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching yourself a new story, a story where closeness doesn't always equal pain, where trust is possible, where you can be fully yourself and still be loved. That story won't erase the past. The wounds will still be there. The scars will still ache sometimes, but they'll stop defining you. They'll become part of your history, not your identity. And in that shift, connection stops feeling impossible. It starts feeling like something you can grow into, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. So if you're someone who feels like connection is impossible, I want you to hear this. It's not your fault. You didn't choose to be scared. But you can choose what happens next. You can choose to stay exactly where you are, protected, isolated, safe. Or you can choose to take a small step forward, to risk being seen, to let someone in just a fraction more than you usually allow. Both choices are valid. Both require courage. There's no judgment here. But if you choose to try, if you choose to lean into the discomfort, know this: you won't be alone in it. There are people who understand, who've walked this same path, who know what it's like to feel disconnected, even in a crowded room. And when you find them, when you recognize each other, it won't feel impossible anymore. It will feel like coming home. Here's the thing about feeling disconnected. It tricks you into believing you're the only one, that everyone else has figured out how to belong, and you're the outlier, the broken one, the one who missed the manual on being human. But that's isolation talking. That's the voice of a wound trying to protect itself by keeping you small. The truth is, most people are walking around feeling some version of what you feel, scared that they're too much, scared that they're not enough, scared that if people really knew them, they'd leave. The difference is, some people have learned to whisper that fear to someone they trust. And in that whisper, they find relief. Not because the fear goes away, but because it's no longer theirs alone. That's what connection is. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to share it. And you have that courage. You've always had it. It's just been buried under years of survival, years of protecting yourself from a world that didn't always feel safe. But survival is not the same as living. And at some point, you get to decide if you want to keep surviving or start living. Living means risk. It means vulnerability. It means the possibility of being hurt again. But it also means the possibility of being seen, of being known, of finding people who don't need you to be perfect to love you. And that possibility, however small, however fragile, is worth the risk. So let me leave you with this. Connection doesn't feel impossible because you're incapable of it. It feels impossible because you've been hurt, because you've learned to protect yourself, because vulnerability feels like standing on the edge of a cliff with no guarantee anyone will catch you. But here's the quiet truth. You don't need guarantees. You just need to be willing to try, to show up as you are, messy, uncertain, imperfect, and trust that the right people will meet you there. It won't happen overnight. It won't be easy. There will be moments where you want to give up, where the walls feel safer than the risk. But if you keep trying, if you keep choosing honesty over hiding, connection over isolation, something will shift. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but gradually, gently, you'll start to notice that the world feels a little less lonely. That being seen doesn't always lead to pain, and in those moments, however brief, you'll remember what it feels like to be human. Not because you've earned it, not because you've finally become perfect, but because you showed up, as you are, and someone chose to stay. That's connection. That's what you've been searching for, and it's not impossible. It's just been waiting for you to believe you deserve it. You do. You always have, and maybe, just maybe,